Good morning, students. I welcome you to the National University online class. During this pandemic, I feel proud to be the part of this National University online class lecture as a resource person. Please maintain the health rules. Our subject is English program. This program is for B Honors First Year students, course code 211101. Name of course, English Reading Skills. Today's lecture number 2 and title is Reading Comprehension Practice. And here I am Khandagar Mushir Rahman with you, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Gavanda Government College, Gaibandha. So I hope you have attended my first lecture, that means the previous lecture. And today you all are fine to attend this second lecture. Can you remember anything of the first lecture? Let us see today's topics. Recapping, checking the previous home task, reading comprehension practice, grammar practice, and the class will be end up with home task. So what is recapping? Recapping means recalling. Can you recall, can you remember about the last class, previous class, what we learned in our last class? Actually, this is a learning process. It's a technique of learning process. When we attend a class or when we read something, we should share it with others later on. If we can share it later on with others, our learning, that is a perfect learning. Otherwise, if you cannot share what we learn, if you cannot share it later on, so that is not a learning actually. That's why recapping is a system or process or learning techniques. So today we are going to recap first the last class, what we talked about in the last class. Try to remember. I think you can now recall some of the things. In the last class, we talked about what is reading, different types of reading, purpose of reading, and how to improve reading skills. I think you can remember now. Those who have attended my last class, I'm sure now you can remember some of the things like skimming, 4 types of reading. What is skimming? Skimming is a quick reading, running the eyes over the text quickly to get the gist. And scanning is also a quick reading, looking for a particular piece of information. This is the difference actually, skimming and scanning. To get the gist, skimming, both are quick reading, but scanning to get a particular piece of information. Intensive reading is what? Shorter text, extracting specific information, accurate reading for details. So when we read, deeply with every details, that is intensive reading. Actually, in our comprehension passage or comprehension practice, what passage we read, that is intensive reading. Number 4th one is extensive reading, longer texts. For pleasure and needing global understanding. So when we read for pleasure or to know about other culture or countries, about the culture and countries, about anything, any literature for our pleasure, that is extensive reading. And we also talked in the last class about the purpose of reading. We read for a pleasure, we read to be entertained, we read to get knowledge, information. Those are the purposes. And we also talked about the steps or tips to improve, how to improve your reading skills. I think you have already started to follow these steps. Those who attended the last class, I am repeating the steps. You have to make a special time to read, and you have to choose the right books for your reading. Ask yourself questions while reading and after reading. Actually, while you are reading, you should ask some questions, pre-reading, post-reading, and while reading steps I mentioned in the last class. Improve fluency first to remove your shyness, to remove your hesitation, to remove your stammering or phobia, whatever you say, of reading English. So first you have to gain fluency. If you get fluency first, then you will have no hesitation to read English. Later on, you will try to learn the meaning. Is the 5th step. Once you have learned to speed up, that means when you have got your fluency, then you slow down. That means try to know the meaning, give importance to know the every details of the text. Ask lots of questions while reading. Read it again. Can you remember Ezra Pound, the poet said, reading first time is just seeing, So reading once means just seeing, not reading actually. That's why if we want to get the content of any text properly, we should read at least twice. If we read thrice, we get better understanding of the text. Read many kinds of texts. That means you should not confine yourself within the textbooks only or the study guides. You should read other things also: emails, Facebooks, articles, journals, and storybooks, and different type of funny books, magazines, to improve your reading skills. And of course, you have to enrich your vocabulary to improve your reading skills. If you have a good, rich vocabulary, then you will feel comfort reading any English texts. So these are the things that we talked about in the first class, previous class. Today is in the second lecture, we are going to practice comprehension passage. So now I will give you a passage, you will read it, and later on I will give you some questions to answer. So while reading, you follow the reading techniques: skimming, scanning, and intensive reading. This is not actually reading for pleasure. This is not extensive reading. Now you have to do, I mean, intensive reading, because after the reading, you will be given some questions. So start reading. Reading is two types we learned. One is reading silently, another aloud. Reading aloud, reading silent. So you have to take silent reading now. Take 2.5 minutes or at least 3 minutes to finish this page. While reading, you should uh, find you should look for the new. If you find any new word or new information, if you think it's important, you should write it down in your exercise book. Any difficult word, any important information that will help you to answer the following questions. So read quickly. After your reading, I will read once for you. Then I will give you the questions. Thirty seconds to go. Have you done? I think you have finished this first slide. Now the story is continuing in the second slide. Another 2 minutes to go for this slide. So the steps or techniques you should use now while reading silently, of course. You should ask some questions while reading. You should point out who are talking over here or about whom you are reading. Those are the things. Any characters, any names that you should pick up. Have you done? Over 10 seconds or 15 seconds? I think you have done. Now look at the last part of the story. Not more than 2 minutes. Try to finish this one. I think the story is not so difficult for you because most of the words are very familiar. Not so difficult words are here. Those who are still slow, try to be a fast reader. I mean, quick reader. As you have learned fluency first. So you have to read fluently with correct pronunciation. Another 15 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds. I think you have done. Now I am reading for you. So go back to the story again. So I'm reading and trying to give you some meaning also while reading. And after this reading, I'll give you some questions to answer. So this is the story about the life of Helen Keller. Many people have heard of Helen Keller. She is famous because she was unable to see or hear, but learned to speak and read and went on to attend college and earn a degree. Her life is a very interesting story, one that she developed into an autobiography. So autobiography means life story of a person or written by that person himself or herself. So this is the autobiography of Helen Keller, which was then adapted into both a stage play and a movie. That means the story, autobiography that was written as a story, later on it was adapted as movie, I mean drama, play drama and also movie film. How did Helen Keller overcome her disabilities to become a famous woman? Read on to find out. So with these disabilities, I mean challenges, problems, Helen Keller became a famous woman. How? That is the story here. Helen Keller was not born blind and deaf. That means when Helen Keller was born, she was not blind and deaf. Deaf means short of hearing, you cannot hear properly. When she was a small baby, she had a very high fever for several days. As a result of her sudden illness, baby Helen lost her eyesight and her hearing. Because she was so young, when she went deaf and blind, Helen Keller never had any recollection of being able to see or hear. Have you got the meaning of this sentence? Because she was so young when she went deaf and blind, Helen Keller never had any recollection of being able to see or hear. What does it mean? Recollection, you know the word recollection? Recollection is a, I mean here the meaning is memory. Recollect, the verb is recollect, noun is recollection. Recollect means to recall, to remember from the memory. So it's memory. Helen Keller never had any recollection memory of being able to see or hear. That means once she was able to see or hear, I mean she could see or hear, that she forgot because at such a early stage of her infancy or childhood, she became deaf and blind that she forgot that once she was okay, I mean, she could see and she could hear. She had no problem. That memory she has lost. Since she could not hear, she could not learn to talk. Since she could not see, it was difficult for her to move around. For the first 6 years of her life, her world was very still and dark. I think you have got the meaning of the first slide, first page of the story. Now look at the second one. Imagine what Helen's childhood must have been like. How her childhood was. Can you imagine? Actually, it's very sad and pathetic, of course. She could not hear her mother's voice. She could not see the beauty of her parents' farm. She could not recognize who was giving her a hug or a bath or even where her bedroom was each night. More sad, she could not communicate with her parents in any way. She could not express her feelings or tell them the things she wanted. It must have been a very sad childhood indeed. I think I've got the meaning. Nothing difficult here. When Helen was 6 years old, her parents hired her a teacher named Anne Sullivan. So Anne Sullivan was a teacher. She was appointed as a teacher to teach Helen. Anne was a young woman who was almost blind. So Anne Sullivan, who was given the duty to teach Helen, Anne was almost blind. And she was also a young woman. She could hear, but she could hear. However, Anne Sullivan, I mean, she could hear and see, and she could read Braille. Braille is a reading system for the blind people. So she was a perfect teacher for young Helen. At first, Anne had a very hard time teaching Helen anything. That means at first time when she went to teach Helen, she felt some problems, disturbance. She described her first impression of Helen as a wild thing, not a child. Why? Because Helen did not like Anne at first either. She beat and hit Anne when Anne tried to teach her. However, the two of them eventually came to have a great deal of love and respect. I think you've got the meaning. Now the last part of the story. Anne taught Helen to hear by putting her hands on people's throats. So Anne taught Helen to hear. Helen could hear. How? By putting her hands on people's throats. Because when people make sound, there is vibration in the throats. Touching the vibration of the throat, she could realize the words. She could feel the sounds that people made. In time, Helen learned to feel what people said. Finally, Helen could understand by feeling the vibration of the throat, what the people would say. Next, Anne taught Helen to read Braille, which is a way that books are written for the blind. Finally, Anne taught Helen to talk. Although Helen did learn to talk, it was hard for anyone but Anne to understand her because she could talk, but not the way as normal people as we speak. She used to use sign language or anything else that only Anne could understand and could translate it for the other people. As Helen grew older, more and more people were amazed by her story. She went to college and wrote books about her life. She gave talks to the public with Anne at her side, translating her words. As you see, as we talked here, that means Anne was there to translate the words or sign language spoken by Helen for the people. Today, both Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller are famous women who are respected for their life's work. They're very famous for their life's work. Though they are disabled people, handicapped people, disabilities, means handicapped, physically handicapped, but still they are, for their work, they have become famous in the world. Now, it's your turn to answer some multiple choice questions. So I'll give you the question first. Later on, I'll show you the answer. You will check your answer. Let's to look at the questions. Try to give tick mark to the right options. Number one, Helen Keller could not see and hear. And so what was her biggest problem in childhood? Option A, inability to communicate. Option B, inability to walk. C, inability to play. And inability to eat. Have you given tick mark? Very easy, I think, for you. Helen learned to hear by feeling the vibrations people made when they spoke. What were these vibrations were felt through? Have you got the questions? The option is mouth, throat, ears, lips. What were these vibrations were felt through? How? By what organs the vibrations were felt? I think very easy for you. Now look at question number 3 and 4. From this passage, we can infer that Anne Sullivan was a patient teacher. We can infer this because, you know the meaning of the word infer. Try to get the meaning from the context. From this passage, we can infer, we can decide, we can conclude. Infer means to come to a decision, to conclusion. We can infer that, we can conclude that, we can take the decision that Anne Sullivan was a patient teacher. We can infer this because option A, Helen hit and beat her and still remained her teacher. Option B, Anne taught Helen to read only. C, Anne was hurt for hearing too. D, Anne wanted to be a teacher. So give the tick mark to the right option. Question number 4. Helen Keller learned to speak, but Anne translated her words when she spoke in public. The reason Helen needed a translator was because, so why Helen needed a translator? Because option A, Helen spoke another language. B, Helen's words were hard for people to understand. C, Helen spoke very quietly. D, Helen did not speak but only used sign language. Which one? So the time is over. Now check your answer. First one is option A, inability to communicate, because it was her problem in the childhood, great problem, biggest problem. Number 2, option thought, it is very easy. Have you done correct one or wrong one? Now look for 3 and 4. The first option is the right answer. Helen hit and beat her and still remained her teacher. So this shows the patience of Anne Sullivan was a patient teacher because Helen hit and beat her and still remained her teacher. That is the right option, of course. For question 4, what is the reason Helen needed a translator? The reason was Helen did not speak but only used sign language that the other people could not understand. Only Anne Sullivan could understand, and she would translate the sign language spoken by Helen for the other people. So this is the right answer is option D. So have you corrected all the 4? I think some of you, of course, done all the 4 right one. So congratulations to you. Now we'll move to grammar practice. I'll show you today what some grammatical items that are given to you in the exam paper after on the basis of the comprehension passage, comprehension story. Look at the grammar items. Identify the following sentences. Can you? According to structure. In the next class, I'll try to show you the basic rules, basic techniques, how to transform or how to identify the sentences. But before teaching you, actually, I am going to just know how much you can remember, because up to class 12, intermediate level, you have done all these things. Different type of sentences, simple, complex, compound, transformation also you have done. So this is not new. So I'm asking you today, try to just check yourself and check your level, how much you are still capable with these grammatical items. So mark it as simple, complex, or compound, all these sentences. Try to write them. Just 1 minute time. First one, when she was a small baby, she had a very high fever for several days. Right beside simple or complex. Number 2, Helen Keller was not born blind and deaf. Simple or complex. Just write in short quickly. As a result of her sudden illness, baby Helen lost her eyesight and her hearing. Simple or complex or compound. Just write down beside. And was a young woman who was almost blind. Next one. And taught Helen to hear by putting her hands on people's throats. As Helen grew older, more and more people were amazed by her story. So just mark it. The time is over. Now check your answers. The first one was complex sentence. You see, why complex? If there is one main clause and one subordinate clause, that is a complex sentence. Now look at this sentence. When she was a small baby. This is subordinate clause because in complete sense. When she was a small baby. She had a very high fever for several days. This is the main clause. If we find one subordinate clause and one main clause in a sentence, that is complex sentence. I think you can remember now. You can recall now complex, compound. So Helen Keller was not born blind and deaf. This simple sentence, of course, because this coordinating word is here, but it is not coordinating two clauses. It is coordinating two words. So looking at and, we should not confuse. This is compound. It's not compound. There is only one verb. That's why this is a simple sentence. As a result of her sudden illness, you look at this part, there is no verb. So this is a phrase. This is not a clause. As a result of her sudden illness, baby Helen lost her eyesight and her hearing. So though the sentence looks long, it contains only one main verb, finite verb, lost. That's why this is also a simple sentence. So when we find any big sentence or long and large sentence, we should look for the verbs. Anne was a young woman who was almost blind. So here are you see two verbs, and here is one subordinate clause who was almost blind in complete sense. That's why this complex sentence. And taught Helen to hear by putting her hands on people's throats. This is simple. Again, don't confuse, because you have to look for the verb, main verb. If there is only one main verb, finite verb, that is simple sentence. How long the sentence is, that doesn't matter. And taught Helen to hear. To hear is infinitive, it's not verb. The main verb is taught. It's the only one finite or main verb. To hear is infinitive. It's non-finite verb. By putting her hands, this is not verb also. By putting, by plus chiran, putting her hand with ing, her hands on people's throats. So this is only one verb. That's why it is also a simple sentence. Last one. As Helen grew older, more and more people were amazed by her story. So this is complex. As Helen grown. So the verb is grew, here one verb. And this is a clause, and this subordinate clause, because in complete sense, as Helen grew older. So here is one subordinate clause, more and more people were amazed by her story. This is a main clause, this again a complex sentence. Now, can you try to change these sentences as directed in the next slide? Look at the next slide. Let's do a little work. It's like a class work, you know. I told you, when you sit for the class, you must take pen and paper beside you. If you don't keep pen and paper with you, then you cannot do work. This is actually practical work, practical class. Learning by doing. Just listening is not a proper learning. Learning by doing, you know. So you have to do some work. Do it quickly. Another minute. As directed. I'll give you 1 minute to finish this. You have to make it simple. The first one, you have to make it simple. Second one, complex. Third one, complex. Fourth one, compound. And you have to change the voice, active and passive. That you are also familiar with, I think, because up to intermediate level, you had this. In the next class, I'll try to show you some basic rules of transformation, of course. But today is just introducing or reviewing the things that you learned before, and you have to do in this March first year also, these things. And the reading skills. Have you done? Now check your answer. Match your answers with the following. In or during her infancy or childhood, you can write in or during, or you can write infancy or childhood, the options. You can write in her infancy or during her infancy. So you look, this is not a clause now, this is a phrase. There is no verb, so this is not a clause. During her infancy or childhood, she had a very high fever for several days. Now this is simple sentence, because here is only one verb, had. And this portion is a phrase. There is no verb. And second one, we have made complex. When Helen Keller was born, she was not blind and deaf. You see, here we have made a clause. When Helen Keller was born, this is subordinate clause. She was not blind and deaf. This is main clause. That's why this is complex sentence. Look at the sentence. Helen Keller was not born and blind and deaf. It was simple. We have to make complex. When Helen Keller was born. So that's, we have added a subordinate clause. Baby Helen lost her eyesight and her hearing as she became suddenly ill. This is a complex. So what we have done, again, to make it complex, we have added a subordinate clause. As she became suddenly ill. It was not there. Go back to that question. As a result of her sudden illness. There is no verb. So this is a phrase. From this phrase, we have turned this phrase into a clause, subordinate clause. Then the sentence turned to be a complex one. Look at the answer again. Baby Helen lost her eyesight and her hearing. The main clause is unchanged. The phrase is turned to be a clause as she became suddenly ill. So became is a verb. Now this is subordinate clause. Have you got the point? We have to make a subordinate clause from simple to complex, to make from simple to complex. Anne was a young woman and she was almost blind. Compound. Compound means what? There is coordinating words or two or more main clauses, I mean coordinating clauses. As these main clauses are added with coordinating words conjunction, that's why these are also called coordinating clause. So two or more main clauses added with conjunction. This is compound. Helen was taught by Anne to hear by putting her hands on people's throats. Passive. Helen was taught by Anne to hear by putting her hands on people's throats. An active one, as Helen grew older, her story amazed more and more people. Her story amazed, attracted more and more people, or surprised, amazed or surprised more and more people. This is the active one. Look at the question was, Anne taught Helen. This was active. To make it passive, we just change subject to object and the form of the verb. Helen was taught by Anne. The answer is Helen was taught by Anne. The other parts are unchanged. And again, the question was, as Helen grew older, more and more people were amazed by her story. It was passive. We have to make it active. The answer is, as Helen grew older, her story amazed more and more people. So, have you done? How many have done corrected? Who has done all the sentence corrected, answers corrected? So, congratulations again, because you have remembered those things that you learned up to HSC level. In the next class, we will do more practice with some basic techniques, how to change. Now, another item you are going to be introduced today of your question paper in English reading skills in part A, synonyms or writing word meanings and making sentence. On the basis of the passage, some words should be given. So from our passage, today we have read Life of Helen Keller. I have given some words here. Now you have to write the meaning of these words in English. So get ready, start writing the answers. Write down the meaning of the following words in English and make your own sentences with them. So 2 minutes time. To do this, you will get 2 minutes only. Autobiography, deep, recollection, recognize, impression. Write down the meaning and try to make sentence also. If you cannot make sentence, first write the meaning. While I was reading the passage for you, I already told you the meaning. Can you remember? That's a technique to make your brain sharp. Now match your answer. Match your answers with the following. Autobiography means life story of a person written by that person himself or herself. Here is a sentence I have given. You might write another sentence on your choice. Anna Frank's diary is a famous autobiography. Deaf means short of hearing. His grandfather has become deaf. Recollection means memory. Shelley lost the recollection of her childhood for a severe road accident. Of course, you might write your own sentence, no problem. Recognize means to identify. Can you recognize the man standing at the gate? Impression means idea. First impression is not always the last impression. So I think you have written some different sentences, of course. It is good. You should not write down only one sentence. You should make various types of sentences with the same word to improve your, I mean, English skills, reading skills and writing skills. So today we are going to be at the end of the class. So home task. So before giving today's home task, I would like to know, did you do the last home task? We are supposed to ask you in the first. I am asking you at last. After attending my first class, did you do the homework? The class was reading skills. I asked you to read at least one passage or a story, and after reading that passage or story, any articles from newspaper, you should make some questions on the story. That's a technique to improve your reading skills, I mean, understanding level of English. Now, today's home task. What is autism? You have to write, you have to do some writing works at home on the basis of this story. Today's story was about actually autism, the life of Helen Keller, an autistic child, handicapped child. So you have to write from your own knowledge. What is autism? Do you have any autistic child in your family? If yes, how do you treat him or her? If not, how can you help an autistic child of your society? So you have to think, okay? So you think, make your brain to work and write at least one page for each answer or half page for each answer, okay? That will improve your writing skills also. And nota bene, that means special attention, do more and more practice on transformation. Don't forget to do it because you learned it after intermediate level. Now you have to revise those things. Use any good grammar books. And next class, I will come with practice on transformation and with some basic techniques of transformation sentences. So thank you for attending the class. Stay home, stay safe. Pray for all. Have a nice time. Bye-bye. And hope to see you in the next class. Thank you again.